Good morning. Welcome to my little live session here on YouTube. Thanks for joining me. Anyone in the group yet? I see a couple of people have been signed up for notifications. So hopefully you'll be joining me soon. In this video, what we're going to do is basically go through a Q&A about what we can do with the situation that we have now that we're all in quarantine. I've been in quarantine for myself for the last 3 weeks. And it's dramatically changed my plans for training and for adventures, and I'm sure that it's going to be changing a lot of your guys' plans as well. So in this video, what we're going to do is go through some of the things that we can do to prepare ourselves, to prepare our mind, our bodies, in particular focusing on training, what we can do to get ourselves ready for the mountains when this situation eventually passes, and it will eventually pass. I know that it may seem very daunting at the moment, the situation that we're in, but I do want to keep it really positive and really light in this session. And I want to take the questions that pop up both on the live feed and in the replay. So we're going to keep this one up on YouTube for everyone to follow along to in the future. So, best university for mountaineering. That's the thanks, Krishna. That's the first comment. Welcome, buddy. Yeah, as you join in, let me know a couple of things. Where you're from. It'd be great to see people from all around the world. So let me know where you're from. Let me know what you are training for at the moment, or what you were training for, what goals are you working towards, and let me know some of the things that you're doing at the moment to keep fit with training, because we don't want to be going backwards during the time that we're locked inside. I certainly don't. Hi from France, in quarantine from London. Hey, Lauren. Yeah, I don't know how you guys are going, but I've been locked up for 3 weeks, and I would say stuck at home, but realistically, we're safe at home. I think it's such a good thing that people have taken it upon themselves before their governments to do self-isolation and self-quarantine. So if you've been doing that, you guys are amazing. Well done. Keep it up. I've noticed that over in the United States, and I've got a lot of clients in the United States, they're still able to go out and go hiking, which on one hand is cool, but on the other hand, it's potentially a difficult situation for emergency services and that sort of thing. So I would just keep that in mind with your training over the next couple of weeks. We just had a whole bunch of people, some names that I recognize as well. This girl hikes, hey, from Southern California. I was supposed to be hiking in the PCT. No, yeah, I've got a couple of people that are training with me at the moment for the PCT. And we have a lot of uncertainty. It's really hard to know what to work on. But that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hi from Ottawa. Hey, Paul Maguire. Hey, buddy. Paul's training for Kilimanjaro. We're going to talk about Kilimanjaro a little bit later on as well. In fact, next week we're going to do a virtual climb of Kilimanjaro. If you're interested, I'm going to do it live on YouTube. And we're going to climb the height of Kilimanjaro by doing step-ups. And obviously, step-ups is one of the things that we can do while we're at home that is pretty easy for us to follow along to. So we're going to be virtually climbing Kilimanjaro on the 11th of April, which is Parkinson's UK Day. We've got a client who suffers from Parkinson's, and he's training for Kilimanjaro. We don't know whether Kilimanjaro is going to be completely cancelled at this stage. I guess that remains to be seen with a lot of other trips. But if you guys had trips that have been cancelled, let me know. I'm sure that that's going to be the case for pretty much everything for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. So what we're going to do in this session is talk about how we can stay fit, some of the things that we can do to utilize what we have at home already. We talk about using household objects for training, and I've got a video coming out next week about a gym tour when I'm going to show you what I'm working with on my balcony. And I've really only got 5 pieces of equipment. I don't have any weights. So I'm going to take you guys through that in more detail about my particular setup next week. Hey, Nico. Nico has been helping me out with my ultra marathon training. He's done a couple of marathons and he's training a bunch of other people online for marathons. So he's been helping me out. Thanks, buddy, here in Barcelona. Unfortunately, I have pretty much cancelled my ultra marathon attempt, the Buff Trail Epic. I think it'll probably be cancelled. So, I mean, I haven't run in 3 weeks. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really allowed out of the house. I've got a couple of people from Brazil. That's cool. I've got a few clients from Brazil, from Belo Horizonte. Hey, Tammy. Tammy's training with me at the moment. Sounds like her trip is off, though, at least for the one down in Tubcal. That's cancelled, but we're working towards Mont Blanc. How to stay adventurous during COVID-19? Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? So we're going to have some home adventures. Like, I think to keep you, hey Tom, just to keep you entertained, I think now is a good time to really watch some amazing films. There's been some great ski films and some great mountaineering films come out in the last year. If you've got suggestions, please put them in the comments section below. I'm going to be catching up on some of Killian Jornet's films and his books. I think now is a great time to do some reading. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been much of a reader. In the past, I'm kind of on and off with it, but I think now is really a good time to kind of lock yourself in the cabin and sit by a fire if you've got one and get some reading done. And let me know what you guys have been reading over the last couple of weeks or what's on your reading list. Luis Alvarez from Los Angeles. Being able to get up to a local mountains solo. Yeah, that's a good point. So hopefully hit the P&W this summer for Mount Baker. Yeah, I hope Mount Baker and Mount Adams and all these kind of 14ers are open by the summer. I guess we just have to wait and see what happens. But I mean, I guess speaking about being optimistic, I think you've just got to plan that everything's going to be okay and everything's going to work out fine by, hopefully this summer, this July. But we really don't know what's going to happen. But I'm going to stay optimistic and I'm going to make the most of my training at home. And I'm going to make sure that I don't go backwards and I don't get any less fit. Paul says we're doing a step up for kids as replacement fundraiser on April the 18th. Yeah, so it's good to see a couple of these virtual climbs happening. I'm going to get involved in a couple of them just for fun to keep me mountain fit. My training has changed quite a bit. I'm going to focus on strength. And we're going to dive into some questions here pretty soon, but I'll tell you guys what I'm focusing on with my training at the moment and the way I see it. So like I said, my ultra marathon has been effectively for me cancelled. I haven't run in the last 3 weeks. I should have been running 90 to 100 kilometers a week at this stage, and I'm not. So I don't think I would be responsibly able to go and run 68 kilometers in the mountains and do 5,000 meters of ascent and descent, having, have this gap in my training. So I might end up doing a shorter run, but for the moment, I'm going to be focusing on strength. So the kind of things that I'm doing, and you'll see the video that I'm posting next week, is that I'm focusing on strength. And the one piece of equipment that and this is to answer a question from Casey, who a couple of people sent in questions from Instagram. So Casey asked me, if you could take just your body and one piece of equipment into quarantine, what would you take? And I would take rings, gymnastics rings. They are 100% the most useful thing for me. I mean, I really enjoy training my upper body. I'm quite capable of training my lower body just as it is with no equipment anyway. But training your upper body without equipment is really hard. And so the rings makes it incredibly challenging, and there's really no end to how far you can progress with the rings. So I mean, TRXs are great. You can do pull-ups, you can do rows with TRXs, but rings allows you this really 360-degree almost range of motion with your shoulders, where you can build really, really strong, healthy shoulders. And especially if you're a rock climber, if you don't have a pair of rings, you're missing out. Get yourself a pair of rings. And the clients that I've been talking to this week, I've kind of been encouraging everyone to get a pair of rings, because now is a great time to work on strength. Jose or Rojas, enough time to read Mountaineering, Freedom of the Hills. Yeah, that's a big book. I have a funny story about that. I had it just on a PDF back in 2011, 2012. Like, I think it was like a photocopied version that someone sent me, and maybe I still have that somewhere. But I was traveling around the world at the time, reading as much as I could. I think I got through the whole book. But this is the thing with your skills, with your rope skills. Especially, obviously, if you're a mountaineer, these are the kind of things that you're going to have to keep sharp, because you're probably not going to be able to get out into the mountains. And I'm seeing a lot of photos on Instagram of people climbing in their kitchens and doing a table traverse and climbing on chairs and all that sort of thing. But I would really recommend, if you only had a very limited amount of time, that I would be focusing on my skill work as well, putting up a couple of anchor points and just practicing my knots and just kind of keeping that fresh, especially if you're planning to get out and do some sort of summer alpine climbing. Fingers crossed everything is okay by the summer. So working on skills is a really good idea as well. So I'm going to dive into a couple of the other questions that I got from via email and on Instagram. And I've really tried to pick questions that are going to be relevant to everyone. And if you do have questions, feel free to shoot them in the comments. I'll probably answer the ones that are like useful to the greatest number of people. If you have specific injury kind of questions, that might not be the best questions for a live forum. So yeah, email me if you have sort of really specific questions, or maybe go see a physical therapist. Okay, first question. Well, Casey was our first question about a piece of gear. Question from Randy T Fan on Instagram. He said, aside from box step ups, are there any good cardiovascular exercises to do prolonged zone 2 training? Okay, so that's a pretty big topic, and I was actually meant to post a video about aerobic training last week, but basically kind of everything changed, and we've had to update my whole video schedule to be, Corona and quarantine friendly. So aerobic training is a super crucial part of your training, and the research that I've read and the kind of theory that I subscribe to is basically working a lot less harder than what you think you need to work. I think a lot of people, particularly when they're running, they're trying to push themselves super hard all the time. And that will probably take you out of your aerobic zone. Now, aerobic zones are super confusing because there's a bunch of them. If you Google aerobic zone, you'll see lots of different pretty pictures with all kind of different graphs that indicate which zone is attributing to your heart rate at the time, how many beats per minute your heart is moving. So zone 2 typically would be, depending on who you are, somewhere between 60 to 70 BPM, or 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, or maybe up to 75. But like I said, it depends who you ask. There's so many different systems. So I don't really quite kind of like that system. I tend to go with minus 10 beats per minute of my aerobic threshold. So if you're not sure about any of this that I'm talking about in terms of my aerobic system, anaerobic system, aerobic threshold, I've literally just in the last couple of hours released an ebook and a program called Elements, and the link is in the description. And there's 10,000 words in there that you should read, and a lot of them are about aerobic training. So if this is confusing you already, I think you should jump in and get that my little book, because it will detail a lot of that stuff. So what can we do for aerobic training other than step ups? Well, my favorite version of this, and I have a video of this it's not in any of my programs yet, it's just for one of my clients, but aerobic cross training, really, really simple. So the question was, what exercises other than step ups can we do? And the answer is almost every exercise that exists. You can use anything you want as long as you stay in your zone 2. So what you'll need to get is a heart rate monitor. This one's from Polar. It is 15 years old. It's falling apart, but very, very, very useful. So I always recommend chest strap, goes across here, as opposed to there's watches around that take your radial pulse. I don't think they're anywhere near accurate enough yet, and this is something that we really need to be accurate with. So I would highly recommend that you get a chest strap heart rate monitor. And then you want to be making sure that you're staying in your aerobic zone with whatever exercise you're doing. So when I do it, I'll generally set up my rings and I'll start doing rows at almost like standing height. I'm just rowing, and I'll come down to a point where I'll shift my feet forward and come more horizontal, and that makes the exercise more difficult. And then I can see my heart rate slowly coming up. So you want to build up from your normal resting heart rate very, very slowly, so that we can give the body a chance to move the blood away from the organs and into the muscles. This is what warming up is so crucially important. So if we're not running, and by the way, you would do that with running as well. You just ease into running or swimming or cycling or whatever your type of aerobic training is. So the answer to the question is you can use lunge variations, squat variations, push-ups, pull-ups, rows, any of these kind of basic exercises and every single variation of those exercises to keep doing, 20, 30 reps of, and make sure your heart rate stays in that aerobic zone. And it's simple aerobic cross training. So it's super important that you don't, pick exercises that will push you out of your aerobic zone and push you into anaerobic or a mix of the two systems. We need to stay in your zone 2. So I guess that what helps then is to have a good repertoire of exercises in your mind that you can switch quickly to. And I was talking to one of my clients today who had brushed through her updated program, and she said, God, I know all these exercises, but I just haven't seen them in so long, and you just forget them, and they're great exercises. So building up a bit of a bank, maybe in a spreadsheet or in your mind, of exercises that that aren't too hard, that you can do indefinitely, because that's what aerobic training feels like. It feels like something that you could basically sustain indefinitely, and you want to stay in that zone. So that's as simple as it is, and you want to maintain that for as long as possible. But ideally, I'd start with 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and kind of build it up 5% each week from there. This is an interesting question from Jergley. Sorry, I'm ruining your name. Hey, Chase. Question: how do you find elevation training masks for mountaineering training? This is a super interesting question. I've been waiting for someone to ask me this. So I have used them in the past. I used them when they first, I don't know if when they first came out, but the first time I kind of saw an ad for one, I think it was like 2013. I started the business in 2012. So I had maybe 10, 15 face-to-face clients at the time. And maybe some of them are watching now. If you're from Brisbane and if you're an old school base camper, say something in the comments. I bought one, and I was an affiliate for the altitude mask for a while, and I was like recommending that people use them, because on the surface I saw it and I was like, okay, I get this is like pulmonary restriction, or it's building pulmonary resistance, and I thought ultimately that's going to help you become stronger cardiovascularly. I was under no kind of assumptions that it was good for becoming acclimatized. I don't think that certainly won't help you acclimatize. But the one thing that I think is probably where it becomes most useful is if you're climbing 8,000 meter peaks and you'd never worked with a respirator before. So those things are incredibly uncomfortable, and I mean, they're getting more comfortable, thankfully. But that kind of changes the way that you breathe. It changes your posture to have this weird thing hanging off your face, and you feel kind of claustrophobic and restricted. So in a way, I think it would be useful for just having that feeling as you're climbing. Like if you've got an altitude mask on and you're doing your step ups, just kind of makes everything a little bit more realistic, and you kind of feel a little bit hardcore. But I don't think there's any science at all that suggests that they're useful for helping you acclimatize to altitude, and I don't think I wouldn't recommend it for aerobic training benefit to make you super stronger for going to the mountains. I hope that makes sense. Essentially, think of it like it's kind of a gimmick. It's a bit of extra fun. But at the time, I think I bought a couple of them, and I recommended for my clients to get them because I was young and stupid and naive, and I thought that they kind of looked cool, and they do look cool. You look pretty intense when you're running around in those things. So let me know if anyone's got one. Put it in the comment section below. I think mine is still in Australia somewhere in the shed, gathering dust. So no, it's not something I use, but a good question. Tom, hey Tom, how are you, buddy? Tom asked my favorite place to ski. You know what? I have no idea really, because I'm not that much of a skier. I think my favorite place, like my favorite day that I've ever had skiing, was my first day skiing like backcountry in New Zealand. I'd never skied with touring skis before. I'd only ever skied on piste, and I didn't know anyone who was into ski touring in Australia. It's not really a big sport, obviously. But I went to New Zealand and I was like, I'm going to hire these skins or whatever. And I Googled it, looked on YouTube to figure out how to do this. And I went and hired the skis from Small Planet and went to the Remarkables ski field. And I went backcountry on the Remarkables on like a really, really rare kind of powder day. And it was amazing. And I'll never forget it. Unfortunately, I don't have much footage left. I've got one or two clips, but they're really, really grainy, like 720p that I ripped off Facebook from when I posted it. So yeah, to answer your question, Remarkables in New Zealand. Mason B says, well, man, you should keep making food prep videos. You know what? I'm really getting into cooking through this coronavirus quarantine thing. I'm really getting into making these delicious meals, and I'm writing them down into this big recipe book, and I'm going to share it with everybody when it's finished. And I don't get that many questions about nutrition. I'm not a nutritionist. To be perfectly honest, I don't know that much about it. I just eat. I'm almost vegan. I hardly eat any dairy. I treat myself with cheese on a margarita pizza every now and then, but I'm predominantly plant-based. I don't really like the word vegan. It kind of implies lots of other responsibilities that I'm not ready for. I like using leather boots and that kind of thing, and there's animal products and everything. It's pretty hard to be totally vegan, but yeah, I'm predominantly vegetarian, so any recipe books and any videos I do in the future will be pretty much plant-based, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing some of that stuff, Mason. So yes, I'm on board with that. AD is preparing for Mont Blanc in July. I hope you can do it, buddy. I hope it's cleared up by then. I hope everything's back to normal. I'm going for runs. Apart from that, what are the mountaineering specific exercises? I should do at home. I don't have any weights at the moment. Yeah, that's cool. You don't need weights. So AD, I would suggest that you spend your time working on building a base of strength. So I'd be working on core is very important. Really solidifying that. I would check out my hollows video. If you're watching in the replay, I'll link it up here. Yeah, check out that hollow core training video to really solidify your core strength. And then just start working on, you don't have any weights, but that's absolutely fine. You can follow along my bodyweight workout that I did in Oslo in the snow. That's good for your lower body. And I would probably check out the mountaineering workout because that's got some pull-ups and some push-ups in it. And I would probably do those things for maybe a 6 to 8 week period and see how you can progress through the progressions that I've offered there and feel like you've built some more strength. But honestly, aerobic training is super important. If you can still run, that's awesome. Definitely make the most of that. Build your aerobic base. You've still got April, May, June. Yeah, still got 3 months. You can build some significant aerobic capacity during that time. So nice big long runs, feeling easy in your aerobic zone, and maybe a few tempo runs where you're pushing, perhaps running at race pace. I would split those up in a 6 week block of aerobic, and then maybe a 6 week block of doing aerobic with some tempo as you work towards Mont Blanc. Hope that helps. And I really hope it's open for you. I would love to get to the Alps this summer, but we'll see. I'm going to go back to some questions that I got from Instagram. How do you set your Petrofly asked on Instagram, how do you set your training? Do you do different things every day to keep it interesting? Okay. Generally, I focus on one thing at a time, and I really recommend that you guys do this as well. It's very difficult to achieve achieve gains or improvements in more than one thing at a time. So for example, if you go out looking at a 6 week block of training and you want to improve both your strength and your aerobic capacity, that's going to be very difficult. So what is the best thing for you to do is to look at all of the time that you have leading up to your goal. Let's say it's a year. So meet here in the middle. We'll break it down into 6 months and maybe break that down again into 4 sets of 3 months, 12-week blocks, and pick one thing that you want to improve on in each one of those blocks. And it might be starting with aerobic down here and then finishing with some more power and speed towards the end of your goal. Depends what you're training for. But to answer your question, that's how I do. That's how I kind of plan my training. I focus on just improving one thing at a time for each kind of block or each phase that I'm training in. And that's the same thing that I do with my clients as well. And in terms of what I do throughout the week, in a strength phase, I typically be doing 3 to 4 strength training sessions a week, and maybe one higher intensity sort of not aerobic, but tempo run or something like that, or getting out into the mountains. It kind of just depends. And then of course there would be daily movement practice, stretching, mobilizing. Petra also asked about stretching, and when I do stretching, like how much stretching I do after each workout. I don't typically stretch after a workout. I'll generally stretch either first thing in the morning or the middle of the day. So and this is kind of one of the things I wanted to touch on. One of the general kind of themes of this this Q&A is to start your day right, to set yourself up well. Many of you guys are probably working from home for the first time, maybe ever, And one of the good opportunities we have is that we can be the masters of our own time and our own schedule and our own space, unless you have kids or something. I don't have kids, luckily, but if you do, wow, you're doing an amazing job looking after your kids and working from home. So keep it up. But yeah, I generally do movement practice first thing in the morning. So that's a series of sort of 7 or 8 exercises. Pick the things that I'm working on currently, trying to improve about the way I move. And they're not so much stretching as they are kind of dynamic movement. There's a little bit of stretching involved, but it's mainly free flow kind of body weight movement that I go from one exercise to the next, and that's what I do first thing in the morning. So in terms of stretching, I generally recommend that people stretch before they go to sleep at night. That's just what the research says, the research that I've read at least says is most beneficial. But the reality is that it's not practical for everyone to do that, and it doesn't fit into everyone's lifestyle. And that's part of learning to build your own habit systems, is just figuring out what works for you. It might not be useful for you to stretch the last thing in the evening. You may be just really tired and want to go to bed. Maybe you want to meditate before you go to bed instead. Maybe you want to watch Netflix before you go to bed. I don't know. Or read a book. Maybe that might be a little more productive. But it's all about kind of figuring out how to fit these things in. So what I do in my programs is I give people like a week of all the things that I want them to do in a week, if they're at a certain level. And if they're not at that level, and if they want to start at a regress level, then I have other recommendations for a week that might be a lot lighter, with more sort of lower intensity exercises and a lesser amount of volume overall throughout the week. So yeah, it really depends on what you're training for and what you have available to you. Tom says, have I ever been to Wales? No, I haven't. I've got a couple of friends there that are into their climbing, and it looks absolutely incredible, and I would love to go to Wales and check it out, but I've never been. I haven't ever been to the UK, but I would love to go when all this drama is over and we can go back to hitting up the mountains, hopefully very soon. So general points, I think, yeah, start your day right. I think if you are working from home, it's very easy, especially at the moment, to get caught up in the latest news and social media. And like, I check the numbers for coronavirus, the infections, basically every day to keep an eye on it. Here in Spain, it is some of the worst numbers in the world. I think we're 3rd. US is number 1 now. Italy is the 2nd. But I try and keep have a quick look at it every day. But first thing in the morning, I'm kind of very precious about where I put my energy. First thing in the morning, I go straight to basically I put on a cup of coffee, and then I sit down and I journal and I write out what I'm going to do for the day, any training I'm doing, videos and planning, all that kind of stuff. And then I'll do a brief meditation. I use the Headspace app. I paid for it for a year. I was like, yep, that's a good investment. It's like $90 or something. And it's really cool. So that's been, honestly, I'm not great at meditation. I'm still learning, but I'm getting better at it. I guess that's the whole point. So I do a little bit of meditation in the morning, and then I'll go straight into my daily movement practice, which is what I was talking about before. 7 or 8, 9 exercises that I push together, one after the other. Just generally do 1 or 2 sets, and then I go straight into whatever I'm working on for the day. So getting a good start to the day really helps. I think doing a mini movement, some sort of mini kind of exercise to get the heart rate up a little bit, to get some blood pumping through your brain, to wake you up a little bit, it goes a long way to setting you up for the day, especially if you're working from home. But some of the good things about working from home is that you can stop in the middle of the day and you can drop and do, 20 squats, 10 push-ups, and 5 pull-ups or something to that effect. You can do that for 2 sets and then go straight back to work. I mean, you don't have to have a shower. You're sitting at home, maybe alone or like with your partner or whatever. You can squeeze in these little workouts, and you probably wouldn't have been able to do that if you were working in the office. You can sit down and stretch and meditate for 5 or 10 minutes here and there throughout the day. You've got a lot more freedom with your time. So if you are working from home, if you've got that kind of, I guess it is a luxury at the moment. If you've got that luxury, then I'd recommend you use it to your advantage. I'm reading a question from George. So George, not George, Jergely. Another question, Chase. How do you use stiffer, super stiff mountaineering boots that are basically only comfortable in deep snow up hills? Do you carry several pairs of shoes for a trek? Not several, I just carry 2. So I just carry my trail runners. I do almost everything in trail runners. If you guys have been watching the channel, you notice that I hardly ever wear hiking boots. I'm looking down here because I've got a new pair of boots that I'm going to talk about maybe and review. But yeah, so I will bring I don't know if you've seen my mountaineering gear video, but I will take my Scarpa Phantom Techs. Usually they're like strapped to the outside of my backpack because they're so massive, and I'll just wear trail runners up until the point where we put on our crampons. And then from that point onwards, my trail runners go in my pack, and I've got my boots on for the rest of the climb and the descent. And then I put my trail runners back on when we're off the ice or off the snow or whatever. And then I can move quickly on the way down. So yeah, I don't think you would need to, I mean, every mountain's different, I guess, but I don't think you would need to have, a trail running shoe and then a hiking boot and then your climbing boots. I think that would be overkill. At least it is for me. Trail runners and your stiff mountaineering boots is what I tend to do. Janez, just wanted to say hi. Found your channel recently. Great content. Stay strong and motivated. Thanks. It's good to hear from you guys. Keep the comments coming. Keep the questions coming. Dr. Deadbeat, this guy's been on my channel for ages. How are you, buddy? Are the insoles worth the hype? Yeah. So this is a question relating to mountaineering boots. The gel insoles that I talked about in my gear video. So they're like a thin layer of gel insole that you slide into the mountaineering boots. Yes, they're absolutely worth it. I think I paid like 10 euros. So like, 10, 12 US dollars. Totally worth it. So much more comfortable. Yeah, get a pair, definitely. Niels has an interesting question. Hey Chase, wondering if you ever considered to use your social media following to build a mountaineer network, for example, how to find climbing buddies. Yeah, I think about that all the time. I'm a small fry, really. We've almost got 20,000 subscribers to the channel, but it's growing. Yeah, essentially what I want to create is that for sure. I'm part of a group called Mountaineers Down Under. I don't know where you're from, but in Australia we have our own group, MDU. Shout out to any MDUs if you're in the group. Hello. And I would love to get that big, to get that influential. But yeah, if anyone has any ideas about how we could put that together, I think that's probably one of the most the crucial things that really holds people back, and did hold me back for many years. Just trying to find climbing partners, and it's still hard for me. I'm living in a country where I don't really speak the language that well. I've got a couple of guys that I climb with. One is a rock climbing buddy from Australia, and then I've got Roger, who's been in a bunch of my videos. He's Catalan. But when you find climbing partners, hang on to them. They're so good. Don't move to the other side of the world. I really miss the guys that I climb with all the time. Sharpie in particular, he was the guy that I went on a lot of my adventures with. We were a really, really good team. I miss him. So when you do find a climbing partner, don't let them go. Sounds very sentimental, but it's the truth. All right, let's go back to some questions from email or Instagram. Where do you get inspiration from future challenges? I, just like everybody else, I kind of follow people on Instagram that are just bossing it. And a lot of the time, these guys that are really pushing the limits and who are really climbing incredible lines and going into wilderness areas and doing steep, difficult, dangerous missions, no one's following them. They might have like 400 or 500 followers because they're out there just doing it and they don't particularly care about capturing it. I wish I was that cool, but I'm not. Like every single trip I'm going on, I'm like trying to make videos and trying to take photos so I can share it with you guys and so I can kind of build this channel and this business and this kind of persona. And don't get me wrong, I love it. I absolutely enjoy it. But sometimes I feel like just going out to the mountains for myself without my camera and just enjoying it. It's been a while since I've done that, and I think for me, when all this is over and we're able to go back out into the mountains, I'm probably just going to take 1 or 2 days for myself alone, no camera, no social media, no nothing, and just get out there and soak it up because I really miss I miss it already. Miss being out there, and I think it's a going out into the wilderness on your own is risky, particularly at the moment, but I think there's a lot to be learned about yourself and when you do that. But I guess it just it's something that you should kind of build up to and build that trust with yourself and build your skills and your knowledge slowly over time so you can get to that point. And if you want tips for that, I would say you basically start small, like start with something that's in your backyard, so to speak, something that's close by. Go do a short hike on your own, and then maybe it's a slightly longer hike with a little bit more pack weight, and then maybe it's a small mountain, maybe a 1 or 2 hour hike on your own, and just kind of slowly build up those skills over time and build that confidence. I've got a question from Dash All Day. Is your training mostly bodyweight workout? Could I just do boxing training for the mountain training? This is a really good question. Earlier on, we had a question about how to, what other exercises other than step-ups could you do for zone 2 training in aerobic, in your aerobic zone. And yeah, just kind of like shadow boxing, I guess, is another one of those exercises that you could do. In terms of boxing as its relevance to training for the mountains, I wouldn't structure my training for the mountains around boxing, because boxing, whilst it is amazing for cardiovascular fitness and you definitely get super strong and super fast and very agile, particularly on your feet as well, like the footwork thing is amazing. I just think your time is better spent doing the staple things like building your aerobic base, building your total body weight strength, building your core strength, and working on the ability and your durability, and then the outdoor skills that come with everything else. By all means, don't give up boxing. Like when I work with clients that really love something like that and they want to keep it in their training, I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll do it once a week or twice or something. But you shouldn't structure your training around the mountains by boxing, because it's just, that doesn't have a solid carryover to the kind of elements that you need in training for the mountains. Tom asked, how long will I be streaming for? I'll probably go for, I thought originally an hour. I think I've been on for like 45 minutes now. I'll probably do an hour, maybe and a half. I don't know. If you guys keep the questions coming, I'll probably stay for as long as the questions keep coming in, to be honest. I could do this all day. the so much has changed. I've wanted to make so many. Basically, every day I wake up with a new video idea at the moment because there's so many things changing and there's so much that I want to share. And that's why I did this live broadcast, this Q&A, because I've just got to get these things off my head. And if I put them out there into the world, I remind, maybe you guys can remind me later. But I've got a huge list of videos that I want to make over the next coming weeks. And just on that, don't worry about, for me, for the content side of things, I've got probably 2 months of content ready to go of things that I've filmed over the end of last year and the first few months this year. I've got loads of videos coming out that I filmed already. So I've got a gym tour, my basically bodyweight gym tour. That's one that's coming up very soon. I've got a whole video on aerobic training, and that video on aerobic training will probably be 20-25 minutes, and it won't even scratch the surface on the kind of information that you need to know about aerobic training. It's super important. That's why I wrote that ebook, the Elements ebook, and that program, which is in the description. It's $10. I released it like a couple of hours ago. So there's a load of information in there. But that aerobic training video will be coming out relatively soon. Then I'm going to review a pair of hiking boots that are barefoot hiking boots, which is crazy. I saw an ad come up on Instagram for these barefoot hiking boots, and I sent them a message straight away. I said, this is amazing. Can you send me a pair? I really would like to try them and do a review. And they sent them to me. So I'll give you a quick look. I'll be reviewing these very soon, and they're pretty sexy, right? Really nice wide foot base. They're from Vivo Barefoot, so I'll be reviewing those soon. I have had like 2 days maybe in the mountains using them, so it's not exactly going to be an endurance review, but they feel great. And I think mainly that video is just going to be about foot care, foot health, and how to kind of release your feet from these entrapped style of 1970s joggers with a heel lift and squished toe box. I think we need to move away from that as quickly as possible. I don't think it's good for the feet, so I'm going to be talking about that in depth in that video. And then I've got a bunch of videos about running, because I ran for all of this. I was running 5-6 days a week. If you follow me on Strava, it's not very interesting at the moment, but for a while there I was running 5 or 6 days a week, up to 60, 70, 80 kilometer weeks. So I've got a few adventurous run videos that I want to share with you around Montserrat. So if I am posting stuff in the future, please be aware that I'm not breaking quarantine. It's just that I filmed it already, and it's from the archive. This is a good question. This girl hikes. You're coming up with some great questions. How do you feel comfortable testing your limits? I usually overestimate difficulty and underestimate how I will perform. I'm wondering how I can really push to test myself without risk. Yeah, this is such an important question. So I think this is why training is important, right? And even if it's training at home on a balcony or in your living room, I feel like training is the place where you want to test yourself the most. You're much safer testing your own physical and mental limits in your own living room, doing training, or in the gym. You're much safer doing that than you are out in the mountains. I feel like, yeah, you're always going to be probably ending up in situations where you're challenging yourself in the mountains, and where you push the limits, and where possibly you're putting yourself at more risk than you're comfortable doing. But if you're mentally prepared, and if your body is physically prepared from doing the training at home, and you're comfortable with being uncomfortable, then everything is going to be much easier for you to comprehend, for you to analyze, for you to gain control of literally your central nervous system, to stop you from panicking when you're, I don't know, stranded on a rock face and there's a blizzard coming in, that practice that we get from pushing ourselves and pushing our physical and mental limits in training in safer environments doesn't necessarily have to be inside. Like a good example of this is going on a longer trail run and just kind of pushing yourself, or even if it's a run around the city, just pushing yourself first in an area where you've got cell phone reception and you can be rescued and the stakes aren't that high. Learning to push yourself in those situations first, and then gradually introducing them into your training. The other element that becomes very important then is who you're with. So if you are the most experienced person with this group of people that you go out into the mountains with, let's say you go with 3 people and you are the most experienced, that's you wouldn't want to be pushing your physical limits. You want to push their physical limits and their skill limits, perhaps, because you are the most proficient. You are the maybe the mentally, the physically the strongest, perhaps. So you want to be totally in control. You want to be operating at 70% of your limit per se, let's say, and the people who are maybe not so experienced, they might be pushing like 90, and they're going to feel like, wow, I've never done anything like this. This is insane. Are we safe? But you are very comfortable, So, and then at the same time, when you go out with someone else who's more advanced and has a greater skill level than you, then hopefully they'll push you a little further. So it's this game of, this is why finding climbing partners in particular is so crucial, because that relationship will determine how what kind of trips you do in the future and how hard you push it and all the rest of it. So I like to, if you're lucky enough to find a mentor, and I've had a couple of really good mentors in my life, in my climbing life. So I've been super lucky. And at the same time, I've taken on that mentorship role myself a number of times and taken not necessarily younger, but sometimes younger guys or girls and or people older than myself out into the mountains and sort of test them a little bit and have a fun weekend or a fun few days, just pushing the limits, but pushing their limits and not my limits. So I guess at the end of the day, like, if you choose to do easy things, then you may not progress as fast as you want. So it's just about finding the place and the time to push your limits. But that is an amazing question, and I hope I made sense. I feel like I was rambling there a little bit. Oh, she said it makes sense. That's good. Yeah, and finding more experienced friends is a bit of a challenge that we need to overcome. But I feel like this YouTube channel is a great way to do that. I'm going to be opening up the Facebook group for elements. Basically, anyone who buys elements, that's going to be my almost like a graduation process of like, okay, you can do the most basic exercises, come into this group, and hopefully that group will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'll be sharing a whole bunch of information in that group. So hopefully, as that continues to grow, then we'll have like this gigantic worldwide Facebook group of people who are into all kinds of mountain sports, and also the kind of people that are willing to put in the effort and who are dedicated enough to put energy into the training and proper preparation. And I feel like that's a good element for a climbing partner to have. So yeah, that's what I'm on the way to creating, hopefully. Dash all day. Another good question. How do you recommend flexibility and mobility? How long should you do it for each day? I've neglected it and now I'm pretty tight. Yeah. So this is one of the good things about being quarantined, is that we have the ability to just focus in on something and make some improvements in it. So I talk about like low-hanging fruit, the things that you can easily improve over a phase, over a 4 to 6 week period. And Dash, if you have already identified that flexibility and mobility is an issue, I would be asking you, how do you know that it's an issue? Like, what do you feel in your body, like, as you move? Like, are you suffering from chronic stiffness? Is there pain associated with it? Is it just that you can't pick something up off the floor, or pick up the baby off the ground? Or how do you know where those find where those limitations are, and maybe start journaling a little bit about where you could potentially make some improvements? So is it, tight hamstrings, or is it tight quads? Your question pertained to like how much flexibility to do, like mobility changes to do every day. My answer is to focus on what you need to focus on. So if I gave you a 20-minute follow-along video of just like random stretches, that wouldn't be time well spent, because you could be stretching things that you're already quite limber and quite, you have muscle length in, when the reality is that you need to be focusing on maybe just 2 or 3 stretches and doing them every day, not necessarily spending an hour stretching, but just really focusing on those 2 or 3 stretches in that area, really to fix it up. So that's what I would recommend you do. In terms of can't touch your toes at all, I would look at, firstly, I don't want to sell to you guys too much in this thing, but elements is basically the answer to that. I would go and get elements, or do some, posterior chain flexibility and mobility work. The problem with touching your toes as a measure of success with hamstring flexibility in particular is that you're talking about a really complex chain of muscles that runs from literally the top, the back of your skull, right down to your heel and all the nerve endings and your toes and your arches and everything. So a lot of people think they have super tight hamstrings. It's actually something else in that posterior chain. And I would encourage you to think about your body as like links in a chain that are all interconnected, because your calves might be impacting how much you can touch your toes, or it might be your plantar fascia. It could be one of your traps or rhomboids or supraspinatus, anything in the thoracic spine, or even in your neck, like who knows. But there's a problem there in the posterior chain, and that's where having a daily movement practice and just going through and kind of eliminating areas where you are able to gain greater ranges of motion and gain more flexibility, and just kind of tick them off, and then move on to the stretches and the movements in the areas that are really restricted for you. So my first suggestion is, I think I have the single leg deadlift, or at least hip hinge video, is public on my channel, but that's where I would suggest you start, because that is a great little movement. Let's go back to some questions from Instagram and from my email. Gupta, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not. He asked, will there be some kind of online session that I can join into? So I think he saw the live Q&A and was like imagining me doing push-ups and squats and lunges in front of the camera. So that's not what this is about, but I don't know. Do you guys want to see that? I could probably do it. The thing about my limitations here is that I really only have my little balcony gym, which is maybe like 2 meters by 8 square meters, and that's where I do all my training. I could probably I have filmed a video in there already, the hip and core flow video I filmed there, and I've filmed a bunch of stuff over there on the balcony in the last couple of weeks. So I probably could do something like that, but I would probably have to do it pretty randomly when the weather's fine, because lately it's been raining a lot. But I could probably do a follow-along video. It'd be pretty fun. The one thing I just need is I need a wireless mic. Oh, I don't even have the mic plugged in. Maybe I'll plug the mic in. So I need a wireless mic to be able to move freely and to be able to speak, like a Bluetooth mic, to be able to speak directly to the camera. Just lower your volume, or just be careful of the audio for a second, because I'm going to input my mic in 3, 2, 1. And if you guys can let me know if my audio is better, that would be great. Like I said, new to this live thing, not sure if it was going to be a train wreck. So far, it's not too bad though. If you guys could let me know if the audio is better, that would be good. Lorenzo, hey buddy, how we doing? Lorenzo went through our testing crash test dummy program for mountain strength, which is a 6-week strength block. I've more or less taken that off the market for the moment because I really want people to just go straight into elements. I'm kind of really starting afresh with elements. So I kind of want to use that as my kind of graduation process to get everybody in, to teach you the basics, and then we go upwards from there. And mountain strength would be one of those. I'm not totally happy with the program. There's a few things that I want to change about it, and I would like to make a completely body weight, like advanced strength program. And I've made all the videos so far. I mean, I've been making completely body weight videos for the last, I don't know, 9 to 12 months, and I've got loads of them. And I want to throw those into programming. But mountain strength will be getting a body weight upgrade. So there will be like a gym-based mountain strength, and there will be a mountain strength that is completely body weight. I'm glad the audio is better. That's good to hear, because I completely forgot to turn or to plug the mic in. Yeah, so that's one thing I need to get to be able to do like a full online follow along live session. I feel like there's probably a few bits of like technology that I'm lacking. That one of those things is a mic. So I'd love to be able to do that in future, but at the moment, no, I don't have any plans to do that. But let me know if you guys would like to do that. I'd probably end up doing one live on Facebook, if anything, because I think it's a little bit easier. Also, let me know if you guys use Facebook, because I've been considering kind of creating Facebook programs, Facebook groups for all the programs. I'm not a massive fan of Facebook because it's kind of so distracting. I get in there and I'm just get caught up in stuff, so I don't tend to go in there too much. But if everyone's still kind of on board and using Facebook, then we'll be creating groups to kind of talk about the challenges with each program within certain groups. So that might be something that we want to discuss in future. Tim, hey buddy, you also did the mountain strength. I was planning on doing the strength program again during this time, just recovering from some injuries. Yeah, it really depends on what kind of equipment you've got available to you. Like I have nothing, almost nothing. I've got like a step, a pair of rings. I've got my backpack, my heart rate monitor. Then I have very, very important things: foam roller and trigger point ball. So I think that is like the bare necessities for you to do training, and a yoga mat. I spend so much time on the yoga mat. I'm not necessarily doing yoga, but just stretching and doing mobility work and that sort of stuff. Paul McGuire, can you talk about how the virtual Kili climb will work? I would love to, but I literally have no idea. So this is that would be a Facebook Live or a YouTube live event where I set the camera up, and what we'll be doing is climbing. I worked it out with Bob, who's training for Kilimanjaro. He suffers from Parkinson's, and he's doing this for Parkinson's UK on April 11th. We worked out that it was maybe 820 meters for 7 days in a row, or something like that. So we're going to ascend not the total height of Kilimanjaro, not 5,985 meters or whatever it is, but the height from the typical starting point of the route that he was going to do. He's going to do a completely virtual climb of the route that he was going to do. So I think we worked it out to be 820 something meters every day for 7 or 8 days or something. So in my experience, that takes around not very long. Like I think I can do it in maybe 50 minutes with a 10-kilo backpack, just doing step ups. So you need a step, you need your backpack, maybe throw boots, socks, trying to make it as realistic as possible. And we just do step ups for an hour or so every day, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can rack up the ascent. I mean, some of you guys, it might take a lot longer than an hour. Some of you guys might be quicker, but and doesn't you guys can absolutely join in. You can get it done. You can stream yourself, or we can have. I think probably I'll set up a Facebook group, Paul, so that we can all kind of talk about the details and keep each other motivated and that sort of thing. Maybe we can share some podcasts or movies that we can watch, things to keep it interesting while we're doing all these step ups. But yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty fun thing to do. If you want to join in, I would, what can you do? Jump on my newsletter. I think that's in the link in the description. It is the third link in the description. Jump on my newsletter and I'll be sending out some information about when we are doing the virtual climb of Kili. Maybe after we do Kili, we can do all the 7 summits. I don't know. It depends what you guys want to do. But yeah, I've noted that a bunch of people have been doing virtual kind of marathons. I watch Run Steep Get High as a trail running channel, and he was doing a live marathon, just doing loops of a helipad today. And I saw that and I'm like, dude, if you can do that, I can do step ups. That's no problem. So that would be cool to get that together. But like I said, jump on my newsletter and I'll be sending out some information about that. I do really have to be blessed by the algorithm gods on YouTube to get content out to you guys. Like I post a video once a week basically, and certainly not everyone sees it. So the newsletter is basically, I send out a video at the end of the month with kind of a wrap up from me, just a short note about, you know, things that I've been working on, and then I have, you know, my 3 or 4 videos that I posted that month with a little bit of insight into each one, and some other notes and some other kind of things like this virtual climb that I want to keep people abreast of. So if you want to jump on my newsletter, you can, no pressure. It's the link, third link in the description. Hey, Tammy. So Tammy is training with me one-on-one. She's based in Italy and is training for Mont Blanc. Looking forward to supporting Bob on that virtual climb and having lots of fun. I've done some stair climb races in the past at Paxson. Yeah, stair climb races are cool. There was one in Brisbane in Australia called Stadium Stomp that we did one year, where we climbed every single stair in the stadium as you basically went around in a circle on the stadium and climbed every single stair in the stadium. And it actually doesn't take that long. It only takes like an hour or 2, but pretty cool, pretty fun. Stair climbing, I mean, one of the most obvious answers to the general question that this live podcast is answering is, how can you train at home for the mountains? And the most obvious way is to do step ups, and it is by far the most boring way to do the training. But you know, when you train for marathons, it's also boring to run long runs. And sometimes when you're in the mountains and you're climbing long days and it's a complete whiteout and there's no view, that's boring as well. So in a way, doing step ups is, yeah, it's not very entertaining. It can be really boring, but the feeling that you get when you complete 1,000 meters is pretty good. And it is great mental training to really push you through to suffer through things that aren't necessarily that enjoyable. And sometimes the mountains aren't enjoyable, and sometimes it can be really mentally difficult, and sometimes you want to turn around and go home. And that's what step ups and being in the mountains kind of has in common. But I would really encourage you to look at mentally and physically difficult things and just attack them. I think if you chase after the easy things in life, then your life will become very hard in the end. If you chase after the difficult things, the challenging things, life eventually becomes a lot easier. So that's the one thing that I would really suggest that you kind of think about if you are struggling with the idea of doing loads of step ups to try and maintain your maintain your kind of uphill mountain fitness, it's kind of just something that's got to be done. I mean, I'm not able to run. The only option I have for cardio is to do step ups, really. And I can do aerobic cross training, which I talked about at the start of the video. Aerobic cross training for longer periods of time, or I could potentially run up and down my balcony like that guy did in in France. He ran like a marathon on his balcony, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to do it. It just doesn't seem interesting to me. I mean, even running around the city for me is a bit of a something that I don't really enjoy that much. But luckily this year, I absolutely fell in love with training, with trail running. Sorry, I totally fell in love with trail running, and I have been lucky enough to have Montjuic, this small mountain, at my doorstep in Barcelona at my apartment, and then when I'm here in Montserrat, I have the mountain right here, and I've been able to run 20, 24, 25, 30 kilometers in a day. And I just never thought I would be the person that would do that. I've totally fallen in love with running. I spent probably the first 5 or 6 years of my career as a strength coach convincing people not to run, and I've totally done a 180 on that. I love it, but I think it's really important for you to focus on mobility and maintaining good quality range of motion and good quality movement, and having a good awareness of where you are tight, where you are weak, and spending time maintaining that if you are doing lots of running. So that's what I've learned from the last 3 or 4 months of doing loads of running, and I miss it already. I really, really do. But for the moment, we have to stay inside. It is the best thing that we can do for the world, to be kind of locked up and safe at home and limiting our connection with other people for the meantime. And I really think that the sooner everyone does this, the sooner we can all get back to the mountains. And I think that's pretty much what everyone wants, not only just in this group, but I think everyone in the world wants this situation gone as soon as possible. But realistically, the only way that's going to happen is if we all stay home. And the people that are in this group and in this community, I totally understand that you would maybe want to go out alone and go hiking and go walking. And that's why I came here to have direct access to the mountain. But after a few days, I realized that my personal impact from going out running or hiking, even on my own, it has a great impact on putting other people at risk. So I'd really encourage you to stay strict with your quarantine, stay home, stay safe unless you're in essential services, and make the most of training at home and the opportunities that we have. So I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon. If you have other questions, put them in the comments below, but I'm going to kind of start winding it down now, just with some other points that I wanted to get across. On the whole, like I think I discussed this already, but don't try and train everything at once. You will not succeed in doing that probably. Like you will, if you try and do 4 aerobic sessions and 3 strength sessions in a week, you're probably not going to make good gains on either of them. So I would really encourage you to break your training down into phases, 4 to 6 week blocks, and focus on one thing at a time. And right now is probably not, if you can't go out to exercise like I can, right now is probably not the time for you to focus on aerobic training. I would just leave that to later. Focus on strength, because strength takes to be able to develop, and there's a lot of things to be able to figure out in terms of your mobility, where you're weak, where you're tight, where you're strong. And that is really a process of putting a lot of puzzle pieces together that takes a lot of time. Aerobic training is reasonably simple. You just stick in your zone 2 in your aerobic zone and build a huge aerobic base. And whilst that does take a lot of time, probably more time than anything else, it's not convenient for me to do that at the moment, and it's probably not going to be convenient or possible for you guys to do it pretty soon if these quarantines get any stricter. And coming from Spain, where I am at the moment, where it's basically one of the strictest quarantine places in the world, and we have Currently the highest in my province. We have the highest mortality rate of anywhere in the world. It's really bad here. It's really, the quarantines are very, very strict. I'm not going to probably be able to go out running or hiking for the next month at least. So I'm planning to do a lot of bodyweight strength training, and just making the most of that as my situation to work on strength and mobility. And this is a really good time to be thorough with these kind of things, because a lot of you won't have trips coming up in the next few months. It's almost a relief for me to be able to just sit back and look at the greater picture and look at, kind of understand my body and my limitations, where I need to work, and to be in not such of a rush. And it's great to be working with clients that are in the same position. We can slow down and be like, we don't have a massive trip that's coming up in the next 3 months that we have to rush to get fit for. We can take a bunch of steps back and be like, what are we going to do about that really tight calf, or that kind of wonky hip, or that clicking in your shoulder? You know, these are the opportunities that we have to address these things now, because we have perhaps a little bit more time, both time at home, but also time before our adventures begin. So now is the time to be very thorough and very methodical when it comes to training. And I would encourage you to play the long game, and that is similar to what I spoke about earlier, about kind of zooming out and looking at the adventures that you're going to have in the next 5 to 10 years when everything's back to normal. Hopefully it's not that long, but think about the long term, what you're working towards. Develop a practice, develop a series of habits that put you in a situation where you're in better control of everything that you do on a daily basis. You're not dictated by notifications on your phone when you wake up, or you're not dictated by the calls that come in from work that require you to do things. Set your day up in the morning where you prioritize yourself or your family, or whatever else your priorities are. If that means that you get up earlier, then get up earlier. If you need to restructure your day to be able to make those things a priority, then do that, because now if you're working from home, then you have the freedom to do that. Thanks for this. Someone just had a really nice comment came through that made me feel great. So I'm going to read it. Thanks for this live. Got some useful info and confirmed to me that I'm on the right place to get help to prepare myself. We'll get into the basic course to start with. Hey, that's really cool. Yeah, and if you've just joined us and you haven't heard about it, Elements is live. It's been live for a couple of hours, so jump on there. I'll be putting up I'll do a live video on the Facebook group tomorrow. If there's 10 or 15 people that have jumped on it, then I'll come in and say hello and explain how that program works. So I think that's probably about time to wind things down, guys. Thank you very much. If you followed along, if you enjoyed it, let me know where you're from in the comments section, what your sport is, whether you're a hiker, climber, skier, trail runner. I'm really trying to broaden my horizons. I'm an all-rounder. I don't know about you guys, but I like doing a bit of everything. I'm not particularly good at any one of these things, but I like getting out in the mountains no matter what. So I like doing a bit of everything. Let me know what you like focusing on. And the other thing I'd love to know is, what other YouTube channels are you guys watching? I have my favorites. Maybe I'll do a video on some of the ones that I watch. I love Mediocre Amateurs. I'm a fanboy for those guys. And like I said, I've watched a bunch of Runstead Get High lately, because he's Jam is a nice guy, and he's got cool long hair and he runs like an absolute weapon. So let me know what other YouTube videos or YouTube channels you guys are watching, and I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been fun. I wasn't sure how it's going to go, but I think it went well. Yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. I'm going to wrap it up here. If you want to check out the videos I'll leave here, are one about Elements, the program, which is now live, and then 2, I'll leave a video about aerobic training when it's done. But thanks very much, guys. Thanks for joining me. This has been cool. I'll definitely do it again. I'll see you on the summit. Bye.